What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up, a Phillies podcast. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel, and we are going to talk about the 1-5 Philadelphia Phillies. Anthony, we are here. It is the home opener, and the Phillies come limping back to Philadelphia after a disastrous 6-game stretch across the state of Texas and then up in the Bronx this past week. Let's just get right to it. A lot of negativity surrounding this team. Injuries are mounting. Pitching has been underwhelming. They can't hit in key spots. Anthony, what the hell is going on, man?
Welcome to the start of baseball, Bob. I mean, this is not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. But then there are times when this stuff like this happens, and you want to get angry, right? I sit here and I want to get frustrated and say, "Oh my God, how can they be this bad?" And then I look around, and then there's other teams that are going through the same thing, and then you go back historically, and there's other teams that were wildly successful that went through it, and you go, "Okay, I have to breathe. I have to wait. I have to be patient." But I don't think that there's a huge window for patience here, and let's be fair about it. I do think you look here and say 1-5 is a terrible start, but it's not. You can certainly overcome it. But the Braves are flying out of the gate, and if you don't fix this quick, we're going to be in the same spot we were last year, where the division is not even a question, and you're not even competing for the division, and you're automatically just battling for a wild card from May, right? I mean, so that this next stretch of games between now and like I say 17 games, these next 17 games, because they're against teams that the Phillies should beat with a little bit more regularity. They have to win 10 or 11. If they don't, the division's going to be over, and that's not a good thing.
I mean, listen, last season, Braves finished 14 games ahead of the Phillies. We are a week into this thing, and the Braves have a 4.5 game lead over the Phillies right now. And listen, I know that people will say, well, hey, what happened last October? Didn't the Phillies take care of Atlanta? Did it really matter? And I would say, yeah, in isolation, it didn't matter. But if you want to win a World Series, if you want to make a deep playoff run, I would still argue, and I know I have argued this point many times on this show before, you are putting yourself in much better position if you win the division than you would be if you're chasing the final wild card spot. And the Phillies have eliminated all margin for error right off the bat, because I will tell you, and this is not a surprise to us, Atlanta is very good, and they are playing very good baseball right out of the gate. I watched the Padres and Braves on Thursday night, Anthony, and listen, I know the Phillies beat both of those teams last postseason. I get it. So here's the asterisk and all of that. But I felt like I was watching a different sport last night. I mean, it had that October feel. Both teams were playing with a ton of urgency. There was a back and forth dynamic to it. It was exciting. It just felt like the Phillies were still stuck in Clearwater while I was watching two of the National League's best teams play like two of the National League's best teams.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we're saying is that the Phillies obviously came into the season behind for whatever reason, whether it was they overprotected the pitching, whether their guys just were too short of an off season, and just take a little bit longer to ramp up. Whatever the reasoning you want to say, they came in behind, and it's now to the point where you look and say, okay, it happened, but it can't continue to happen. This is as bad as you were allowed to get. We're not happy about going 1-5, but it can't get worse. You can't have it go worse than this. This is where it is, and it's got to stay. This has got to be your bottom, right? It's got to be your rock bottom, and you got to climb up from here. Because if you let it get worse, you're not going to climb up from here.
So we have talked both with each other here on our show on Monday after the Texas series. And we've both been doing these, morning after game recaps this week. And we've kind of alluded to some of the different problems facing this team. What's real, what's not. And hey, everyone concedes that the season isn't over. This is still a really talented team. All of those things, all those qualifiers, all those, PD positive things that we have to piss on this show, because it would be crazy to write them off after a week. And that's all fine and well. But one thing that is very real right now with this team, we can talk about them coming back home. We can talk about them, with the schedule. It's lightening up a little bit here, at least seemingly is, although they are facing some pretty damn good pitching here, over the next two series against both the Reds and the Marlins, as lackluster as these teams both are. I guess the one thing that I kind of keep coming back to, though, that does give me some pause, that does kind of dampen some of my, hey, they'll be all right, is these injuries are real. I mean,
Mhm.
these are real injuries. And we don't know exactly right now if the Brandon Marsh deal is ultra serious. Is this a day-to-day thing? We're recording this ahead of the home opener. He may be in the lineup this afternoon. I don't know, but we know that the Derek Hall thing is trending in the wrong direction. Cody Clemens is now here, so we would probably reasonably expect him to be out for at least a couple weeks here. It would look like. Man, like I just look at this and how many injuries can you sustain? We talked about the Rhys Hoskins injury, and you can kind of create a path where that's not totally devastating, although it has hurt them considerably here over the first week. But now it's being compounded by additional injuries, and this team just simply does not have the depth to, as most teams don't, to withstand 2-3 key injuries to major pieces of this lineup.
Yeah, I don't think the Marsh injury is going to be a big one. I don't, in any stretch of the imagination, even if he doesn't play today, although I do think he will. And this is purely from a weird observation from being in Yankee Stadium on Wednesday. So he's not in the lineup, and we knew all this. Where we were sitting, I had a real direct line of sight into the Phillies dugout, and I didn't see Marsh a lot early in the game. I was thinking to myself, all right, he's probably getting treatment. He's probably, in the back. And then after a little while, I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe he's just not, he's hurt. Like it's like legit. Like this isn't good. But then later in the inning and later in the game and later innings, and it was when, right when they were about to pinch hit for Pache, was at the sixth inning, seventh, whatever inning that was. And sixth inning, I think it was. And Josh Harrison comes up to bat. Marsh arrives in the dugout in full uniform, in his cleats, and he's doing exercises in the dugout. He's stretching. He's doing like little knee lift jogging things, right? And he's got his glove. He's got so. I'm thinking that they were looking at it as a possibility that he was going to may have to go into this game at some point. Maybe not have been their first choice. Maybe that hey, in case of emergency kind of thing. But he was out there doing these things, and so when you see that, I don't think that it's a situation.
I agree with you. I
know what I'm saying?
I don't expect the Brandon Marsh injury to be a long-term thing. I actually do expect them to play this weekend as well.
Yeah.
You go back to Tuesday night though, and little things matter. Everything adds up. You get to the ninth inning, you have a 4-0 lead. You get the ball to Craig Kimbrell. You say, "Yo, man, can you just make this easy for us?" And of course, he can't. Gives up the home run, and that's the play where Marsh injures himself. And I actually saw it in real time.
Yeah.
He went over to the fence, and you could see he just banged that knee up against the fence. His leg, and it was that knee ankle twist. And he said, "There you go. Like that's going to be something." And lo and behold, the next day he's out of the lineup. And that game on Wednesday was a winnable game. It was yet another instance of this team having multiple shots to score, leaving guys on base. Christian Pache, I mean, I gotta say, and we talked about this when he was brought in. This isn't the 2015, 2016 Phillies. They don't have time to take a reclamation project under their wing and do it on the fly. And now this guy is playing considerable role on this team.
Let me ask you this, Bob.
He has been dreadful. Dreadful.
Yeah, especially at the plate. And I think that he also made a mistake in the field.
How about the play on Wednesday with the throw to the plate? Just a non-play. Like
that was my question to you. So that was one of the things I wanted to ask you, because again, I was there, so I don't get a replay. And to me, he was shallow enough, and you got one of the slowest guys running in LeMahieu. Why does he not come up throwing? Like, why is he thinking about it? Even it should be an automatic in that spot. So, like, to me, that's one thing I wanted to ask you. But but it sounds like you agree with me. But the other thing I want to ask is this: with him, you paid zero for him. You basically gave up a middling minor league relief pitcher, okay, who probably is not ever going to touch the major leagues in a trade for Pache. That's how far he had fallen in Oakland. And with that being the case, it goes to show that other teams weren't willing to even pay that to get him. You put him on the waiver wire.
Yeah.
Is anybody going to claim him?
I don't think so. And if they do,
and if they do, no big loss. But if not, you can send him down. All right,
Yeah.
and finally you can get him down there and work with him, and then maybe eventually down later in the season he has a little bit more value, but he certainly does not have the value you hope for right now.
Yeah, if we were looking at this from a player development standpoint, we're not. We're looking at it from a team that we expect to win is 1-5, and this player is not contributing. And not only is he not contributing, but he's killed them in a few key spots,
Yeah,
really big time spots. And so we're focused on the frustration of the result. But from a player development standpoint, if you're looking at this, it's a difficult ask of a kid to come across to a new organization on the fly with a team that's trying to win, getting these big time at bats. Like, he's not ready for it. He's not
yeah,
ready for it. And so to ask the player to try to evolve and learn and tinker and adapt on the fly and also contribute, it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to ask of the player as well.
correct. And so I don't know. I mean, I originally liked the thought of the move because I said, you know what, here's a guy who's really good defensively in the outfield. But then when you make a mistake in the outfield, not that he made a bad defensive play, but when you make a mistake in the outfield for the one thing that you're good at, then you can't be here. You can't be part of this. Like that. That's what. If nothing else, and I don't care if he even throws him out at the plate. Let's say he throws home and the guy and LeMahieu's still safe. At least he made the play. You know what I'm saying? Like he's doing the thing he's supposed to do. That's doing something. That's not even doing the right thing. And so if you can't even do the right thing where you excel, then why are you here?
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing that we are recording on April 7th, and the idea of where's Scott Kingery, bring up Scott Kingery. I think if I told you about a month ago, I was pining for Scott Kingery on April 7th after 6 games, you probably would have looked at me and said, wow, they got off to a pretty bad start, huh? So,
Yeah.
I mean, here we are too.
But the Derek Hall thing, I don't want to overlook that because look, I was not a big Derek Hall guy. I didn't see it, and I kind of felt like the team when I was down there. I kind of felt like he was behind Jake. We talked about this. I kind of felt like he was behind Jake Cave.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Well, he's not anymore because Jake Cave,
Well, he had a couple hits the other day. A sack fly.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. He's a guy. He's look. I don't have a problem with Jake Cave.
He'll save the day. He'll save the day in the lineup.
No. But what I'm saying is,
gets to play 4 times a week now. He'll help carry the Phillies.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the threat of power being out is what's going to hurt the Phillies, because it's not that you sit there and say, "Oh, we need Derek Hall in the lineup," because Derek Hall is what he is. But the fact is the guy does hit the ball hard, and when he connects, there's a chance it's going to go out of that ballpark. And now you took that out of the lineup, and you don't have the threat of power to replace him. So this
Phillies lineup does not have a lot of pop in it right now. Like, you look at what they're going to roll out there this weekend, and hey, listen, Trey Turner, that's fantastic, and we all know what Kyle Schwarber brings to the table, and all fine and well. But go top to bottom, and all of a sudden you're like, this is not a scary lineup. This is not an intimidating lineup. And of course it's not, because they have 3 major pieces missing altogether now, and Derek Hall to a lesser degree, and then obviously Rhys Hoskins and Bryce Harper. It's not a finished product, so I'm not sitting here and saying the Phillies don't have a good lineup come the middle of this season, at least when Harper gets back. But man, like, you look at this thing on paper right now and you go,
yeah. I mean, Cody Clemens doesn't move that needle for me.
No.
So it makes you wonder, does Dombrowski go and address this sooner rather than later?
Just tough. You're going to need a trade partner that's willing to be aggressive on the other end of this as well. I mean, how many teams are looking to make meaningful moves in the second week of the season?
Even if it's, let me say it this way, Bob, even if it's not a first baseman, if you feel like, okay, look, we're in a tough spot, we have to play Alec Bohm at first. And we have flexibility with other players. Can we find just the bat that we're looking for on another team and plug them in and work our guys around that bat?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the plan changed this past week. I expect to see, and I know that last time we talked, I said Alec Bohm will probably be this team's first baseman as early as this July moving forward. I really think that we're entering that space. And now with Derek Hall going down for however long,
Yeah.
I would actually expect Alec Boehm to get the bulk of the work at first base, and you'll see a ton of Edmundo Sosa in the lineup now.
Yeah, that still doesn't give you the power that you're looking for.
No,
right?
it doesn't. No, I mean, we're talking about plugging holes here right now. That's all this is. This is not an ideal construction of a lineup. There really is a lack of power, and part of the lack of power. Let me give you 3 numbers here, because this is the thing I really couldn't wait to talk to you about. Let me give you 3 numbers, and you tell me if you know what they mean. Let's see here: 10, 17, and 6. 10, 17, and 6.
10, 17, and 6. That's a good. No, go ahead. What do you got?
The final 10 games of the regular season in 2022, 17 postseason games last year, and 6 games this season.
Okay.
Nick Castellanos still can't hit a ball over a major league fence in a game. Listen, I know that he got off to an encouraging start, especially in the opener, had a couple hits. 4 for 22 thus far with 12 strikeouts. And I know that he's been the victim of some bad calls at the plate. It's actually robbed him of a couple walks. I'm willing to acknowledge that. I know that he's trying to be more patient. He's working on things. I'm also willing to acknowledge it's been 1 week. But we've talked about when Rhys Hoskins went down, man, the Nick Castellanos bounce back isn't just a luxury anymore. It's something that they need.
Yeah.
And it's something that they still are not getting. I'm just curious what you think, because I have an opinion on this as well, but I want to hear from you first. What have you seen from him? Are you becoming a bit more pessimistic about this resurgence here that we were all kind of, crossing our fingers on? Like, where are you at on Nick Castellanos at this point?
I'm not pessimistic about it. I'm not. I look at the totality of it, and I look at every game, and again, it's easy to sit there and go, wow, he's hitting 180. Just as easy as it is to look at Bryson Stott and say, wow, he's hitting 436, right? I mean, sure. when you're 6 games into a season, numbers fluctuate very quickly, very rapidly. And I felt like, look, Nick had a really good series against Texas. He really did. All 3 games, he was a solid player. Did not have a good series against the Yankees. Like you pointed out, I think 3 of those 12 strikeouts against the Yankees were just brutal calls by an umpire. The thing that worried me a little bit, though, in a couple of the Yankees games is he did chase a couple pitches. And that was the thing that when I talked to him down spring training, that was the one thing that he was adamant about not doing. He said, look, if I strike out, I strike out. He said, but I don't want to strike out chasing pitches. He said that's when I get mad at myself, because that's the thing that the Phillies were mad at him about. Because even Thompson said, we asked, all of us were asking Thompson about how he was approaching things, and he says we just can't have him chasing pitches. So I think that they'll settle for, hey, you swing at a strike and strike out, it's going to happen. Or you get rung up on a ball that's borderline, okay, sometimes maybe you should have swung at it, but sometimes maybe you got jobbed and you got a bad call. I think that they're a little bit more accepting of that, but you did start to see it sneak in a little bit. And I thought that he had a few at-bats against the Yankees where he either swung at bad pitches and missed, or he swung at bad pitches and made weak contact. And that's where I think that ties into what you're saying, that he hasn't put the ball over the wall. Well, why? Because if the pitches that you're swinging at, even if you're making contact, aren't resulting in, good contact, hard hit balls, then you're not helping the team. And I think that those so there is a red flag that goes up from those 3 games.
I didn't really have a feel or any definitive take. I wasn't overly concerned about what I was seeing until the finale against the Yankees. I mean, his at-bats were basically get in the box, turn around, go back to the dugout. I mean, there was just no resistance whatsoever. And it looked like a guy that was starting to, for the first time this season, watch that frustration mount a little bit. And you and I both talked about this back in March, which is if there was a player the Phillies needed to get off to that hot start, it would be Nick Castellanos. You don't want this thing to snowball against him where it turns into 2, 3, 4 weeks. He's hitting 200. He's not driving the ball with authority. Here we go again. I think the working theory here is that there's still that player in there. Like that production still exists within that body, but it just reaches a point where you start to say, like, you can't rely on the back of the baseball card anymore. Like, I think we're starting to slowly creep away now from, wow, just look at his body of work throughout the duration of his career. You know he has it in there. You know it's coming. Like, I would concede that I think he's capable of it, but I'm starting to kind of look less at the whole scope of his career and relying on that for this bounce back and saying something has to give. It's going to have to come from adjustment. It's going to have to come from his own mental ability to work through this. And
yeah,
I would be lying if I said to you that I'm not a little bit concerned, at least, about what we're seeing out of the gate here.
yeah. I mean, I agree with you on that. Like, I mean, I think that there, you don't like to see it mount, right? And I think that's what ended up happening here. Like I said, 3 good games, great. I thought that the first Yankee game was terrible. And in all honesty, I mean, they all were, right? But when they lost 8-1, I didn't think he had a good approach in that game at all. I didn't like the game, even how he performed in the win. I thought that there were a couple of at bats there where just like, yeah, Nick, not good. I think he was 0 for 8 going to that, and then he went 0 for 3 with a walk Wednesday. And I felt like that was the frustration mounting, because I think that he is standing there saying, I'm approaching these right, and I still didn't, and I still struck out. And that's why Kevin Long gets thrown out of the game, right? But because he's arguing that the pitches were low to Castellanos that struck him out on 2 of them. They were down. And I think that's the frustration. So maybe, if anything else, maybe having that extra day off after that game gets him back to where he was, the way he was swinging against Texas. You hope so.
You hope, and you also hope that, his hitting coach kind of going to bat for him in that game. He says, okay, like, I got you. And he gets back to Citizens Bank Park. And not that he was unbelievably productive here last season, but, you get home, you start to feel a little bit better, and let's see what happens. And I think that's what you have to almost bank on at this point. And I don't want to, after, 2 days now since the finale against the Yankees, spend too much time rehashing, the events of that game. But one of the, I guess, what you have to do right now at 1-5 is try to grasp a little bit for the positives. You're trying to look at, okay, this thing is a dumpster fire at the moment, but some good things are happening. What can I kind of grab and latch onto right now? And I guess the performance of Aaron Nola, you would say that in a really big spot, they needed that game, facing a pretty good Yankees lineup. Not the best Yankees lineup, but a solid Yankees lineup.
Yeah.
And he delivered a pretty nice bounce back after what was a complete disaster on opening day. But I will tell you, and this has really always been my criticism of Aaron Nola. Garrett Cole on the other end of this, I think, is in a different category of pitcher. And maybe you don't agree with that. And listen, I know that if you stack their numbers up over a 5-year window, you could probably make the argument that Aaron Nola has been almost as good, just as good as Garrett Cole. I just, as an observer of baseball, like, I like the power arm. I like a guy that can just blow your doors off. And like, that's why I always just kind of look at a guy like Garrett Cole and say, I'd rather have Garrett Cole than Aaron Nola. I don't know how you feel about that, but let's start.
No, and that's fine. And
would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I believe that there is a place for a guy like Nola who's not a power arm to be a great pitcher in baseball.
I do not disagree with that.
Right,
all I'm saying is that I traditionally, if I have the ability to get a guy that can overwhelm you, that's the guy that I like.
Okay, and that's fair. And Cole is a superior pitcher at the moment. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you see how he threw in that game. And his first both starts. I mean, against the Giants, he was great too, with 11 strikeouts in 5 innings. I mean, so the guy is a dominant pitcher, and so yeah, I mean, I get it.
So hold on. I'm not trying to. That's not the point of my conversation.
Yeah, that's fair.
My takeaway isn't that Garrett Cole is better than Aaron Nola. I would actually concede that Aaron Nola was absolutely screwed in the first inning of that game. I mean, that was a huge run early on, sets a tone. Phillies are playing from a hole almost immediately. I mean, Gleyber Torres struck out in that at bat. The at bat's over, and it was on the steal attempt. I think it was. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that brought Judge to second.
Yep.
And then Judge scores, after Torres gets a fifth strike, basically. So then here's my thing.
And it was a broken bat hit.
Yeah, and it
was
was
a good, it was a really good pitch.
Yeah, it was a good pitch. So he really had no margin for error. I can't be critical of anything I saw from Aaron Nola through 6 innings. He was as good as you could possibly want him to be.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you, though, because you're a guy that always likes to kind of break down that moment in the game. Like I'll look at the whole thing. I'm like, what's the end result? Did the Phillies win? No. Did Aaron Nola beat Garrett Cole? No, he didn't. Okay, well, then he didn't do his job. Well, I'm not like that on this one. Great job, Aaron Nola, 3 runs in 6 innings. But I will tell you, there was one moment in this game that truly, truly bothered me, and it came in the 6th inning. So you have LeMahieu who doubles to lead off the inning, and Aaron Nola bears down. He doesn't let the momentum snowball on him, right? And we see that happen with him sometimes. He bears down. He gets Aaron Judge to line out, and then he gets Rizzo to pop out to short. So here we are. He has an opportunity to get out of the inning. And they go ahead and they pitch to Gleyber Torres, who singles to make it a 2-0 game. And at that point, where the Phillies are at with their offense right now. For all intents and purposes, that's pretty much the baseball game. My question to you, and I guess my statement mixed in, is I'm not ripping my hair out that Aaron Nola gave up a second run to the Yankees. But why on earth were they going after Gleyber Torres when you have Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who doesn't have a hit this season, batting behind him in a one-run game? What are you doing?
Bob, I was sitting there with Anthony Jr. and Andrew, my other son, and we as soon as that was coming, we were like, walk Torres and pitch to Kiner-Falefa.
It's a no-brainer.
It was an absolute no-brainer.
It's the closest thing that you have to having a pitcher hitting on and going after the 8-hole. It's a throwback to old National League baseball.
Yeah, it wasn't even a question
from the baseball gods. Yeah. Utilize it, and that to me, it's not about Aaron Nola. First of all, I don't get it, and I'm going to place some blame on Aaron Nola, but it kind of goes to the dugout. And here's one, man. We haven't done this yet, but. Love Rob Thompson. Deserves all the credit in the world for what happened last year. But would you say that staff has been off to an impressive start thus far?
No,
I wouldn't.
No, that's a managerial mistake in my mind. Here's what I'll say though about that at bat. Once they decided to pitch to Torres, he had Torres struck out twice if JT Realmuto holds on to foul tips. Yeah. And I know it's hard to sit here and go, how come a catcher can't hold a foul tip, right? But they were both in his glove and fell out. Both. And the first one you could tell for sure, body language wise, from where I was sitting, I could tell Realmuto on the first one felt like he should have held on to the first one. The second one, not so much. He didn't react the same way. But the first one you could see he kind of bowed his head and put his glove on the ground man, I should have had that one. If you hold on to either one of them. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's the home run. That's not that at bat. I'm on the wrong batter. I'm in the next inning. I'm on the Trevino home run, which was that bothered me too. But okay, you're right. Yeah, the 2-strike pitch to Torres was not a good pitch.
Yeah, Torres who ended up finishing with 3 hits on the day.
Yeah, that was the pitch that Nola threw to Torres. Not a good pitch.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I guess when things aren't going well, when you aren't winning games and it feels like everything is working against you, it's like every decision that you make, it's just getting blown up in your face right now. And when things are going well for a team, they are going to make mistakes. They are going to gamble. They're going to. It just feels like every problem the Phillies are having is being magnified. It's okay. Brandon Marsh is out of the lineup. All right. Well, here comes Christian Pache and just key at bat after key at bat. The big time, big moments are keep finding a guy that can't hit. They have not been able to get away with or cover up their deficiencies to this point.
Yeah. The one, if you want to look for a silver lining there, it's how can you find a silver lining there? The silver lining there is that the number 9 hitter has come up multiple times with runners on base.
Yeah.
So that tells you that eventually when they get it right with the lineup, that the guys who are hitting 6, 7, 8 are doing their job. And that's at least a good sign where they're getting on base and putting the number 9 hitter in his spot where he could drive in runs, right?
Right.
So if you're looking for some silver lining, that's the one thing. But yeah, man, Pache, we already said it. Just he's been a killer since he came up. It couldn't have been more poorly timed.
And it also looked like Gregory Soto was going to work himself out of that inning.
That was the one I wanted to talk about. Yeah.
Unable to do it. Now
Yeah.
we've seen him 3 times, 2 of which he's been pretty unimpressive. He was outstanding in between.
Yeah.
In the Phillies win, he was actually quite good. I don't know if you want to dig back into that at bat, but I would just say, and the reason why I bring this up is he has been less than stellar. Craig Kimbrell has looked shaky, and it's just a thing where I'm hoping, Anthony, that we can, get a month out from all of this and say it was just a bad start.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when you write or you host a baseball podcast about one baseball team and you're only given 1 week of games to talk about, and everything that has happened has been utter shit, it's hard to get on here and say, we got, we're getting back home at the bank. Phils are playing in front of that home crowd. I guess I'm not there this morning. We can try in a moment as we look ahead, but oof.
Yeah, and so the thing with me with Soto is, I've not been impressed. Obviously, there's nothing to really be impressed with. And if you look at that at bat, like I was saying, because I was mistaking it for the Torres at bat, but that Jose Trevino at bat, he had him struck out twice, and Realmuto drops the 2 foul tips, and then he gives him the pitch that he drives out of the ballpark for the home run, which to me, that was when I said, okay, game over. Even at 2-0, I'm like, okay, you're still just a single and a home run away from tying this thing, right? And they did get a run back, right away, and again, a bases loaded spot there, and they only got the 1 run. So that's a little frustrating. But in that spot, I'm like, oh man, you got to get this guy out. How do you let this guy survive this? And then he hits the home run. The thing about Soto that it's befuddling, and they got to figure out his wildness, and that's nothing new. We're not surprised by this, right? He was not a strike. Well, he is a strike thrower, but he's like been effectively wild his whole career. He does walk guys. He's walking too many guys, and that's what he's putting himself in trouble. And it was hysterical. They flashed up on the screen. I think he's like striking out 21 batters per 9, and he's walking 21 batters per 9. Like, it's a terrible percentage of balance that you got between strikeouts and walks through 3 outings. And
it's like the old Jose Alvarado. It's like pre-late June 22 Jose Alvarado.
It's crazy, but it really is, and I think that's what they need to rein in. If you could just get him to control that a little bit more, then the strikeouts are going to come because he's got electric stuff. Okay, but you can't be just coming in and knowing you're going to put 2 base runners on without them even getting a hit off you. And then somebody connects on one that whatever, and then all of a sudden it blows the game open. Like, you can't have that happen. So to me, that's the frustrating thing with Soto so far. You see what they love about him, but so far the stuff that you don't like about the guy has trumped it a little bit. And so it's like, okay, let's get that fixed, because if you don't, then that trade ends up going to blow up in your face, especially considering the injuries you have. And boy, wouldn't it have been nice to have a Matt
You would
Vierling
feel pretty good about this roster
right
now.
now.
Nick Maton and Matt Vierling were part of it, wouldn't
right?
you?
Yeah,
you sure would. So, that does bring us to the home opener here against the Cincinnati Reds, one that takes place on Friday afternoon, not Thursday afternoon. And I don't really think we need to spend too much time talking about the Phillies' decision to postpone the home opener. Needless to say, the weather was spectacular in Philadelphia on Thursday afternoon. I know the Phillies were trying to do the right thing. They were trying to be proactive, give everybody a heads up. I get it. But if you had tickets to that game and you were all packed and ready to go Thursday.
One thing I want to add on it, though, that I do want to say, and I think it's important, for fans to kind of understand. And I'm not trying to absolve the Phillies here, because it's not, they don't get absolution completely here. But this decision, because it's not a division game, is not a Phillies decision. It's a Major League Baseball decision. And they canceled 2 other games along the East Coast as well, tied to this same storm. So ultimately, this is a call by Major League Baseball and not a call by the Phillies. Are the Phillies and Reds in constant consultation with the league when they're making this decision? Yes. And the Phillies are offering up what they're hearing from their weather people. Major League Baseball has their weather people, but ultimately the call is Major League Baseball's call. So while everybody wants to kill the Phillies for this, the call ultimately comes down on the league.
I have a take for
just want to
you.
throw that out there.
I have a take for you. If the Phillies were 5-1 this morning, nobody would give a shit. But they're 1-5, and
Right,
it's
of course.
annoying. And you look up and you say, you couldn't get better weather on April 6th. What the fuck? And honestly, if you're a Phillies fan that had tickets that now has to kind of, reorganize your Thursday, Friday schedule. Yeah, I know people are like, oh, boo-hoo, first world problems. But like, it's real. Some people are driving quite a distance. Some people have childcare set up. Some people don't have jobs that, I got into it last night with John Kincaid on Twitter. Not I got into it, but he's like, well, they canceled it early enough that, you could just, revoke your personal day Thursday and put it in Friday. I'm like, man, like, not everybody's job works like that. Some people are bound to certain days on the schedule. Some people are, bound to partnerships and the way that the company flows. So I don't know. I mean, like, my thing is, should the Phillies be embarrassed or apologetic about what happened? Absolutely not. I get it. I understand what they did and why they did it. But if you had tickets to that game on Thursday and you were ready to go, and now your plans are all jacked up, like, I think it's okay if you were agitated by that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. You can't blame fans for being frustrated. I even had, I don't know if you saw, one of the guys somebody who had tickets to the game was like asking me, in I think in it too on Twitter in advance, like, I'm driving up from North Carolina, like, what are they going to do with this game? Like, I mean, so you had fans who are coming from a guy coming from North Carolina. Do you think he could just change his day? Like, you know what? Don't worry about it. Hey, work.
Yeah, just make a personal day on Friday instead. No big deal.
Yeah, no problem, right?
I mean, I do think it kind of comes back to it's about the frustration of the entire first week of the season, and then this happens on top of it. So people are like, "Come on, man."
Yeah.
Okay, so look, you have the Reds coming in here now, and they are actually off to a functional start. They're 3-2. And we know that Cincinnati's lineup is not particularly one of the deepest in the National League, I think would be a kind way to say it. But they do have some interesting arms. And it starts with the home opener. Zach Wheeler will look to bounce back after a tough first start last Saturday. And he will be opposed by Hunter Green, who is a big arm, high velo, power arm, but a guy who doesn't always get the results to go with the big strikeout numbers. And that was the case in his first start as well. He comes in with an 8.10 ERA. Second game, you have Bailey Falter against Nick Lodolo, who is a really interesting young arm for Cincinnati, a tough lefty, a guy that I don't love in terms of just the matchup there in the second game of the series. And then Graham Ashcraft, right-hander, had a good first start for Cincinnati as well. He'll go up against Taijuan Walker. All of this is to say that I'm not going to sit here and ask you to predict the series or anything like that, but I think that people should understand that, yes, the Phillies are at home. Yes, they are theoretically the better team, but Cincinnati does come in with 3 decent starting pitchers in this series. So if you're just like, well, they'll sweep the Reds and everything will be all right come Sunday night, I don't know that it's going to be quite that simple.
Yeah, I think that you're right on that. And the interesting thing is the Reds, they had a day off before yesterday as well, because their game against, was it the Cubs that got rained out on Wednesday? So they haven't played since Tuesday, the Reds. And so they were able to kind of redo their rotation a little bit here. The Phillies weren't going to be facing Hunter Green. Originally, it was going to be Lodolo today, Ashcraft this game, and then I forget what slug they had going on Sunday. But now it turns out the Phillies get all their top three pitchers in this series. So advantage to the Reds in that regard, in the fact that they are able to throw their best pitchers at the Phillies lineup. And also keep in mind, when the Phillies played the Reds last year, Lodolo pitched well against them, and Graham Ashcraft pitched well against them, right? So both of those guys had decent outings against the Phillies last year. So you're not guaranteed. There's nothing guaranteed. I do still think they win the series. You got to sit there and say they're going to take at least 2 out of 3. You hope they sweep, but it wouldn't surprise me if there is a loss in one of these 3 games. And
Yeah,
I think you're right when you mention Lodolo being the tougher matchup because of the fact that the Phillies, the way things are with their lineups right now, they put themselves in a bind against left-handed starters.
yeah, the Phillies saw Nick Lodolo twice last August on the 17th and the 23rd of August. And on the 17th, they saw him in Cincinnati, 7 innings, 5 hits allowed, walked to 8 strikeouts, no earned runs. He was
Yeah,
outstanding in that game. And I don't know if you recall that. The Phillies actually, it was a day game. They lost late in that game. I believe Sir
yep,
Anthony Dominguez was on the mound when they were walked off in that game by the Reds.
yep.
They did see him a week later back at Citizens Bank Park. He lasted 5 1/3 in that one, gave up only 3 hits, but 4 earned runs, 2 walks, struck out 5. So Phillies did not have a ton of success against Nick Lodolo last season, and that will be a tough matchup on Saturday. Listen, I don't. I'm not sitting here telling you that the Phillies have to win 2 out of 3. They have to sweep, but if they find a way to win this series, certainly if they find a way to sweep the series and they get to Sunday night at 4-5, I think everybody feels a lot better about where things are at. You kind of feel like, okay, the first 10 games, first 9-10 games of the season were an overwhelming success by any measure, and they have a lot of issues, but at least they haven't totally buried themselves. You lose 2 out of 3 in this series, though, and this poor play, sloppy, unfocused play continues, and you're sitting here at 2-7 come Sunday night, and I think you start to panic a little bit. And you could say, oh, you're only 1/16 of the way through the schedule. What do you mean panic? But I mean, as a fan, I think that you take all of this in and say, I might have to reset my targets for this team. I might have to reset my expectations for this team. We've talked about all of these players and all of the things from a baseball standpoint that have gone wrong, and we've looked at individual pitchers, individual hitters. Anthony, the one thing that I really am struggling with the most, though, as I just watch all of these games, and I think I mentioned this on our last episode, I've actually had an opportunity being at home after my son was born last Thursday. I've had an opportunity to watch a lot of baseball around the league, and I don't typically get a chance to do that. Usually, it's like the Phillies and whoever the Phillies are playing. And
Let me ask you a question, Bob, real quick on
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Is this courtesy of my MLB
No, no,
subscription?
it's not
Okay, I
actually.
just wanted to check.
It's not. I actually just have the MLB network on it all
Oh, okay.
times. But I do have that, and it was very handy for that one glorious Andrew Painter inning back in the spring. So
You're happy to
um,
use it. Go right ahead and use it if you want.
I will. I have not since, though. But we'll see here. I think that the thing that really bothers me is that they look sloppy. The base running has been horrible.
Yeah.
There's been defensive lapses. They haven't hit in key spots. And when things don't go right, you say, well, they don't have focus, or it's a hangover from last year, or they're pressing, they're trying too hard. But it does look to me that everyone right now, coaching staff included, like, it just looks like everyone's like a little tight, a little in their head right now. I think they want to win. I don't think these guys turned into losers this offseason. So I just think that everything, as you know, in the game of baseball, this is how it goes. It's all just kind of working against them right now, and they have to stem the tide here.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this in the morning after yesterday. The one thing that you can sit back and look at and say, this is all a terrible start. It's all frustrating. But I think that we really got caught up in the first 2 games where they were absolutely dreadful against the Rangers, or at least 3 of the first 4, right? Where they even got blown out by the Yankees in the first game of this series, of the past series. But if you look at it in the segment of 3 of the in their last 4 games, so the 3 against the Yankees and the last game against Texas, and yes, they're 1-3 in those, but 3 of those 4 games have been very competitive. They've been in it. They've had chances to win all of them. Only won 1, and you lose 2, and that's not ideal. But you look at that, Sunday night game against Texas, should have won that game. You look at the game Wednesday in New York, could have won that game, right? So at least you say, okay, that it may not have stemmed itself right away with wins, but maybe it's starting to stem itself a little bit to get away from the craziness of the first 2 days where they gave up 27 runs in the first 2 games of the season, right? So I think that that's the one thing you look at and say, okay, maybe it's a slow turn, it's a slow stemming of the tide, but that it's coming. it could be wrong, could completely be wrong, and they could continue to have frustrating defeats like this and let it snowball. But it could also be that, yeah, it's going to get there. It's just they needed a little bit slower of a process to get back to where we thought they were going to be.
Well, we'll certainly see. I mean, teams that win 100 games, they win a lot of games by one run, right? And teams that win 60 games lose a lot of games by one run. And
fair,
and I'm not trying to oversimplify this equation here, but again, when you're talking about 1 week worth of games, you say, okay, well, that's true. They did play some competitive baseball this past week. Got to win these games though. So okay, I think you and I are both going to be in the house today when the Phillies make their triumphant return to South Philadelphia.
Yeah. I was wearing a polo shirt if we went yesterday. Now today I got to wear long sleeves.
I actually went out. I was going to wear this yesterday, this Nike polo shirt. But yeah, you're right. Got to layer up a little bit here. Let's hit the one last thing and wrap this bad boy up. And next time we talk, hopefully we'll be all smiles.
Yeah, no. One last thing is I want to at least make Phillies fans feel a little bit better, because they could today. And look, I know that their record is better than the Phillies, but they could be New York Mets fans today.
I knew you were going to say that.
I mean, come on. Have you seen what they've been going through this week? Since spring training, all the injuries, all the getting blown out of Milwaukee, blowing a game in Milwaukee. They just got swept by the Brewers, where they lost 10-0, 9-0, and then blew a game in the bottom of the ninth and lost 7-6 to the Brewers. They've got injuries out the wazoo. Max Scherzer looks terrible. Omar Narvaez is going on the DL, so they're going to have to call up the catcher, Francisco Alvarez, to come play because they need catching. And maybe that's a good thing for them, because they're actually, and this was the thing we talked about, Bob. They're too frigging old. They are too old, and they got all their pitchers that are hurt and on the DL or IL, and guys are not producing like they thought they would to start the year. Could you imagine being that team with that payroll and have this kind of start to happen to them? Holy smoke! What kind of a fan would you be at that? And by the way, greatest thing ever. Those Yankees fans up there, and they were sitting with us at the game. They were relentless on the Mets. You'd think they would be giving people that are sitting there, my sons are decked out in their Philly stuff, that they would be giving them a hard time. Oh no, it was like they became fast friends making fun of the Mets. That's how much the Yankees fans hate the Mets too. So, what could you imagine what it would be like to be either rooting for that team or covering that team right now? Holy hell!
Well, as soon as you said I have something that make the Phillies fans feel better, I knew the only answer to this could be the Mets. And honestly, I have not had an opportunity to point and laugh at the Mets quite as much, just because of what has happened with the Phillies here for the first week. But I think we had 3 takes on the NL East going into this. Atlanta was going to be really good. Well, we're seeing that.
Yeah.
I thought the Phillies were going to be pretty good. We have not seen that yet. And we thought that the Mets were going to be old. We thought the Mets wouldn't hit. And we thought that the loss of Edwin Diaz would kill them. And all of those things are happening to this point. I mean, the Mets look like they're in a world of trouble. And, the Mets have to kind of also deal with the fact that they're the Mets. And it's just that same old stench, that same old stink. And they do not look like a legitimate threat to contend in the National League again through 1 week. It has helped a little bit. And really, from a standing standpoint, if this is going to turn into a thing, and I fear this, but it does feel like it's going this way, where you say, all right, listen, they're not going to win the National League East. You don't want to fall 10, 12, 13 games behind both teams again, though.
Right,
At least the Mets aren't running away from them out of the gate here, too. That's the one thing the Phillies can kind of hang their hat on and say, all right, well, we're still within striking distance. We get our shit together for 1 or 2 series. We could be in second place, just like that. And I think that's kind of a little bit of a comforting thing as well. The Mets look like they're in serious, serious trouble, Anthony. I totally agree with you.
And I just enjoy it, because every year I hear just
Mets,
Mets, and I look at it and go, I don't see it, man. And I know, and I trust the history. I trust the baseball god. So yeah, there's a little thing, one last thing for fans to at least smile about, even though the Phillies have started 1-5. So.
All right. Well, that will wrap it up for our latest show. We will be back. What
Monday.
the hell day? Is it Friday? Yeah, we'll be
Yeah.
back on. I don't know if we had any morning after recaps or anything like that. No, we'll be back on Monday, hopefully after a series victory for the Phillies over the Cincinnati Reds. For Anthony Sanfilippo, I'm Bob Wankel. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure that you're following us on YouTube, watching the show there, and then catching us wherever you get your podcast. Thanks a lot. We'll talk soon.